In the small town of Crestwood, nestled between rolling hills and dense forest, there lived a woman named Evelyn. She was a quiet, unassuming figure, always draped in dark, flowing fabrics that concealed her fragile frame. The townspeople knew little about her, only that she lived alone in an old wooden house on the outskirts of town. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, her eyes always carrying a distant, unreadable expression. But despite her silence, whispers about her filled the air of Crestwood. Some said she was a widow who had lost her family in a tragic accident, others believed she was hiding a past too dark to reveal. However, what no one could deny was the eerie mystery surrounding her peculiar trade. Evelyn made a living by collecting old clothing. She would visit homes, knocking gently on doors and offering small trinkets in exchange for garments people no longer needed. The townsfolk never questioned her business. After all, she never caused harm, and if anything, she was a source of convenience. Instead of throwing away old clothes, they simply handed them to Evelyn. She would take everything: shirts, dresses, coats, scarves, but most importantly, she always asked for undergarments. At first, it seemed like an odd request, but her explanation was simple: fabric recycling. The town accepted it without much thought, and soon enough, Evelyn became a regular visitor, gathering sacks filled with discarded clothing. But beneath the surface, something unsettling lurked. Evelyn never discarded the undergarments as she claimed. Instead, she stored them meticulously in her dimly lit home, organizing them by color, size, and fabric. Each piece was handled with an eerie reverence, folded with precise care before being sealed away in wooden chests that lined the walls of her bedroom. There was something ritualistic about the way she treated them, as if they held a significance no one else could understand. The townspeople, oblivious to her secret, continued handing over their garments, never questioning where they truly ended up. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in deep hues of crimson and violet, Evelyn received an unexpected visitor. A young woman named Clara arrived at her door, clutching a small bundle of clothes. She had heard the stories about Evelyn and, out of curiosity, decided to see the woman herself. As Evelyn accepted the bundle with her usual quiet demeanor, Clara hesitated, her gaze drifting over Evelyn's shoulder and into the shadowy depths of her home. Something felt off. The air was thick with the scent of aged fabric, and in the dim glow of a single candle, she thought she saw movement subtle, slow, as though the walls themselves were shifting. "Do you live here alone?" Clara asked, her voice tentative. Evelyn turned her gaze to the young woman, a small smile playing at her lips. "Yes," she said simply. "Just me and my work." Something about her tone sent a shiver down Clara's spine. She nodded, offering a forced smile before taking a step back. "Well, I should be going," she murmured, suddenly eager to leave. Evelyn watched her retreat into the night, her expression unreadable. That night, Clara couldn't shake the unease that had settled in her bones. She found herself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the image of Evelyn's house. Something wasn't right. The following morning, she decided to investigate. She made her way back to Evelyn's home, her steps hesitant but determined. As she neared the house, she noticed the door was slightly ajar. Had Evelyn left it open by mistake? Swallowing her fear, Clara pushed it open further, stepping inside. The air was thick with dust and an overwhelming scent of fabric, but what caught her attention was the chests lining the walls. Each one was sealed shut with thick locks, their surfaces scratched and worn with age. Clara's pulse quickened. What was Evelyn hiding? She moved cautiously, her fingers brushing against one of the chests before a sound made her freeze in place, a soft rustling, like fabric shifting against fabric. She turned her head slowly, her breath catching in her throat. From the darkness emerged Evelyn, her eyes glinting in the dim light. "You shouldn't be here," she murmured, her voice almost a whisper. Clara took a step back, her heart pounding. I was just. Evelyn's gaze remained fixed on her, an unsettling calmness in her expression. You want to know, don't you? Clara nodded hesitantly. With deliberate slowness, Evelyn moved to one of the chests, producing a small key from the folds of her dress. The lock clicked open, and as she lifted the lid, Clara felt her stomach twist. Inside, carefully arranged in neat rows, were the undergarments, hundreds of them, each one preserved as though they were artifacts of great importance. But that wasn't what sent chills through her veins. It was the way Evelyn ran her fingers over them, her touch almost reverent. These, Evelyn whispered, are memories. Pieces of lives. People discard them, forgetting their significance. But I remember. Clara felt an icy dread creep through her. Why? She breathed. Evelyn's smile was almost sad. Because the past never truly fades. It lingers, waiting to be acknowledged. Clara stumbled backward, her mind racing. She had to leave. She had to tell someone. But as she turned to flee, Evelyn's voice stopped her. Tell them if you wish, she said softly. But they won't understand. They never do. Clara ran, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she burst into the open air. She didn't stop until she was far from Evelyn's home, her mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. When she finally found her voice, she told the town everything about the chest, the eerie collection, Evelyn's cryptic words. The townspeople listened, their expressions shifting from disbelief to unease. Together, they made their way to Evelyn's home, their numbers growing as word spread. But when they arrived, the house was empty. The chests remained, their contents untouched, but Evelyn was gone. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, leaving only the remnants of her strange obsession behind. For weeks, the town buzzed with speculation. Some believed Evelyn had fled, fearing judgment. Others whispered that she was never truly human to begin with. But one thing remained certain: no one could forget what they had seen. The chests were removed, their contents burned in a great fire at the center of town. And though they tried to put it behind them, an unease lingered in the air, a haunting reminder of the woman who had walked among them, carrying their past in the folds of fabric she held so dear. The village of Dambola was like any other, where life moved at a steady rhythm, and the people shared stories by the fire at night. But beneath the surface of ordinary life, something strange was unfolding. Something unspoken. It started with whispers, hushed conversations behind closed doors, and lingering glances filled with suspicion. The villagers couldn't put their fingers on it, but they knew something was off. And at the center of it all was Nia. She was an unassuming woman, neither too young nor too old, neither too rich nor too poor. She had lived in Dambola for years, earning a modest living by trading fabrics and small household items. But lately, her trade had grown in ways no one could explain. It wasn't the fabrics or household goods that made her business boom, it was something else. Something sinister. At first, no one questioned it. Nia was simply good at what she did. She had an uncanny ability to predict exactly what people needed before they even voiced it. Women would marvel at how she had the perfect cloth for a child's new outfit or a headscarf that matched perfectly with their best dress. But soon, she started traveling to other villages, taking with her large woven baskets filled with items for trade. When she returned, she was richer. Her house, once modest, now had new clay walls with intricate patterns carved into them. She dressed finer, her meals were plentiful, and her laughter, once soft and humble, now carried a confidence that hadn't been there before. Most of the villagers saw her success as a blessing, but not everyone was convinced. Elder Boko, who had lived in Dambola long before Nia arrived, watched her closely. Something about her trade didn't sit right with him. He noticed how she lingered in the backyards of houses, how she often came and went at odd hours. He started paying closer attention. And then, he noticed something chilling. Her baskets never seemed as full when she returned as when she left, yet she never came back with any less wealth. Something was missing. Something was being taken. But what? It was Fatima who first raised the alarm. A widow with 3 children, she was known for her sharp mind and sharper tongue. One morning, she woke up to find that her undergarments were missing from the line where she had hung them the night before. At first, she thought it was the wind, but then she heard from her neighbor that she too had lost underclothes overnight. Then another woman. And another. Soon, the entire village was murmuring about it. Who would steal undergarments? What kind of thief ignored valuables and food but took something as personal as that? The answers were unclear, but the fear was real. And yet, no one connected it to Nia. Not at first. Not until Elder Boko decided to keep watch. One night, he saw her. She moved silently, like a shadow, slipping through the village with a large sack slung over her shoulder. She was careful, deliberate. She stopped at washing lines, at the back of huts, picking only specific garments before vanishing into the darkness. Elder Boko followed her, his old bones aching with each step, his breath held tight in his chest. She walked beyond the village, deep into the forest, where no one dared to go at night. And there, beneath the canopy of twisted branches and the cold gaze of the moon, she met someone. A figure cloaked in black, their face hidden beneath a veil. Elder Boko hid behind a tree, watching, heart pounding. Nia kneeled before the figure, offering the sack. The figure reached inside, pulling out the garments one by one, whispering words that sent shivers through the air. And then, in an instant, the garments disappeared. Vanished into thin air. Elder Boko clutched his chest. He had seen many things in his long life, but nothing like this. His heart hammered in his ribs as he scrambled back to the village, his mind racing. Who was that figure? What were they doing with the garments? And most importantly, what was Nia gaining in return? By dawn, the village was in chaos. Elder Boko had told the chief, and the chief had summoned the people. When Nia arrived, her face was calm, unreadable. The village gathered in the square, their eyes heavy with suspicion. The chief, an old man with a voice that carried authority, stood before her. Nia, he said. You have been seen. Explain yourself. Nia did not flinch. She did not deny. She simply lowered her gaze and said, I cannot. The silence that followed was thick with tension. You cannot? The chief repeated. You steal from your own people. You take what is not yours. Tell us why. Nia exhaled, her shoulders trembling. I took an oath. If I speak, I will die. The villagers gasped. Murmurs erupted, fear spreading like wildfire. Oaths were not taken lightly in Dambola. The chief turned to the village priest, a man known for his wisdom and knowledge of the unseen. What must be done? The chief asked. The priest studied Nia, his eyes narrowing. She is bound to something dark. We must break the hold. He reached into his satchel, pulling out a small bundle of herbs and powders. He circled Nia, chanting in a language that only the elders understood. The air grew thick, charged with unseen energy. And then Nia screamed. A scream so raw, so filled with pain, that the villagers stepped back in fear. Her body twisted, her eyes rolled back, and then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. She collapsed, breathing heavily, her face wet with tears. It is done, the priest declared. The spirit has left her. But the story did not end there. For even as Nia lay gasping on the ground, the air was still heavy with something unseen, something waiting. The priest bent down, his voice low. Who was the figure? He asked. Nia's lips trembled. A collector, she whispered. She trades in misfortune. She takes what she needs and leaves curses in return. The villagers recoiled. The priest nodded grimly. And the garments? Nia's voice was barely a whisper. They carry the essence of the wearer. She uses them to bind souls. To take what is left. The villagers erupted in panic. Some ran to their homes, some wept, others simply stared, horror etched into their faces. The priest turned to the chief. We must burn them, he said. Every garment she has taken. Only then will we be free. That night, a great fire was lit in the village square. The stolen garments, retrieved from the forest, were thrown into the flames. The fire burned high, crackling, spitting, the embers dancing like restless spirits. Nia watched, her face unreadable. And as the last piece turned to ash, a wind swept through the village, a whispering sigh that carried with it the remnants of something unseen. By morning, Nia was gone. No one saw her leave, no one knew where she went. But the village of Dambola never forgot. And for years to come, when the wind blew just right, when the moon hung low and the night was too still, they swore they could hear laughter soft, distant, lingering like a secret never fully buried. The village had always been peaceful, a place where traditions were held sacred and the people lived in harmony, but that peace was shattered when whispers of strange occurrences began to spread. It started with small things: missing garments, particularly undergarments, vanishing from washing lines in the dead of night. At first, the villagers dismissed it as the work of mischievous children or passing travelers, but as the disappearances continued, a sense of unease settled over the town. Women locked their doors tightly, men patrolled the streets with torches, yet still, the garments disappeared without a trace. Then, one fateful evening, young Oma was returning home from the river when she saw a shadowy figure moving swiftly between the houses, its arms laden with stolen fabric. She gasped, her heart pounding in her chest, but before she could cry out, the figure melted into the darkness. The next morning, she told the elders what she had seen, and the village was thrown into chaos. Who could be behind such a thing? What purpose could someone have for stealing such personal items? The elders, wise and cautious, called for a gathering in the town square. The people came in droves, murmuring anxiously among themselves. The chief stood before them, his face grim. We have lived in peace for generations, he said, his voice carrying across the restless crowd. But now, an unknown force threatens that peace. We must uncover the truth before it is too late. A plan was devised, traps were set, watchmen were stationed, and the people waited. Days passed, and nothing happened, until one night, the trap was sprung. A scream shattered the stillness of the night, and the villagers rushed towards the sound, their torches illuminating the terrified face of the one caught in their snare. To their shock, it was none other than Miri, the quiet woman who lived at the edge of the village. Her clothes were tattered, her hands clutching a bundle of stolen garments, her eyes wide with fear and defiance. Why, Mary? The chief demanded, his voice filled with disbelief. What have you done? But Mary only laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down their spines. You do not understand, she whispered. You have never understood. The people watched in horror as she knelt, spreading the garments around her in a strange, ritualistic manner. The air grew thick, heavy with something unseen, something ancient and powerful. The village priest stepped forward, his face pale. This is no ordinary theft, he murmured. She has been weaving spells with these garments, binding our spirits, feeding on our very essence. Gasps rippled through the crowd, fear gripping their hearts. You think I am the villain? Mary spat, her voice laced with bitterness. You cast me out, you shunned me, you left me to suffer. I found another way. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. They had indeed ignored Mary, treating her as an outcast, a woman whose strange ways did not fit their traditions. But never had they imagined she would seek such dark power. The chief priest raised his staff, chanting words of protection, and Mary screamed, clutching her head as if the words burned her. The villagers, emboldened, stepped forward, demanding justice. They seized Mary, dragging her towards the sacred tree where judgment was passed. What shall be done? The chief asked, his voice heavy with sorrow. She has betrayed us, but she is still one of us. The people murmured, torn between anger and pity. Then, from the shadows, an old woman stepped forward, her voice clear despite her age. She must be cleansed, she declared. Let the spirits decide her fate. And so, the village prepared the ritual of purification. Mary was bound, her body trembling as the priest continued his chants. The fire blazed high, casting eerie shadows on the faces of the gathered crowd. Then, as the final words of the incantation were spoken, a piercing cry filled the air. Mary convulsed, her body racked with unseen forces, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. She lay still, her breath shallow, her eyes glazed. The priest knelt beside her, touching her forehead gently. She is free, he announced, but the spirits have taken their price. Mary's mind was shattered, her memories gone. She was no longer the woman they had feared but an empty shell, a reminder of the darkness that had nearly consumed them all. The villagers, though relieved, could not forget what had transpired. They buried the stolen garments, sealing away the remnants of her power, and Mary was given a new life, cared for but watched carefully. The lesson was clear: neglect and cruelty breed monsters, and sometimes, the ones we cast aside find ways to make us pay. And so, the village moved on, but the tale of Mary, the woman who stole their underwear and nearly stole their souls, was never forgotten. It was whispered to children as a warning, a tale of magic and vengeance, of pain and redemption. And to this day, when garments disappear in the night, the villagers still shudder, remembering the time when their own ignorance nearly destroyed them all.